Okay, so I want to start a video series. And it is Bionicle Day, so I'm going to review the first Bionicle novel, and then maybe do the others later. Can't see any problems with this idea. So yeah, Bionicle was a thing. Was. Press have to pay respects. And if you look around on the internet, you can find a corner that, while honestly insignificant in the grand scheme of things, really does care about this LEGO franchise from the noughties. Its toy line and its mystical science fantasy setting seem to have left a legacy, or maybe a legend, in its wake as it passed through the mindspace of young people across the world. But why? Why do people care about this beyond the level of Beyblade or Reconstructors or whatever? Why does it spawn so much excellent art, extensive fanfics, and a wiki with 1,456 articles? Well, I can't really say for sure, but I think the reason for many people might be similar to the reason that I fell for it back in the day. And the reason I fell for it back in the day was these bad boys. Tales woven primarily by the one and only Greg Farshtey. These books brought the amazing world to life inside my brain, and while, yes, they're not a compendium of literary exceptionalism, they were accessible and engaging enough for a young mind like the one I used to have. Now, of course, as someone who grew up with this franchise, I am going to talk about the nuances and esoteric details of it, for sure. However, since this first book right here serves as an introduction to the mythos for those whose lives have not yet been consumed by it, I'm going to give a basic introduction of the characters and concepts. And of course I could be super pretentious and review them all in chronological order, however I would argue that the best way to show the natural flow and progression of a series that organically flowed and progressed as it was created year by year would be to review them in the order that they were created. Kinda like Star Wars. Ugh. Or Metroid. Or the Chronicles of Narnia. I'm not going to hear the end of that, am I? So with that, the first one on my list is the one set in the first story year, Bionicle Chronicles #1, Tale of the Toa by Kathy A. Hapka. We start off with an introductory spiel that sets the stage for the story we're about to read, but also mirrors the spiel from the beginning of the Mask of Light movie. But we're not there yet! The people of the world are called Matoran, and they were brought by the Great Spirit, named Matanui, to the island paradise that they named after him. The Matoran have treasured Matanui's three virtues, unity, duty, and destiny, even as Matanui's brother, Makuta, also called the Dark One, cast him into a deep sleep. Since then, 6 heroes, called Toa, are prophesied to one day wield special elemental powers to defeat Makuta. These Toa are Tahu, Toa of Fire, Onua, Toa of Earth, Gali, Toa of Water, Lewa, Toa of Air, Pohatu, Toa of Stone, and finally, Kopaka, Toa of Ice. Everyone's favorite. This book sets up how they begin their journey. Or at least it's supposed to. See, what happened was this book was released in 2003, but Bionicle started in 2001. There were not initially books to tell the story, but comics released through the LEGO Magazine's Brickmaster subscription. There was also a game released at the time on the Bionicle website that told an exclusive part of the story, which we will discuss later, but by the time 2003 rolled around, LEGO was honestly pretty done with the 2001 story. As such, Hapka had a lot to go on when writing the story, but she was also not just going to retell the previously established plot, at least this time. Thus, Tale of the Toa is not the Tale of the Toa, but a Tale of the Toa. Enough talking about the book though, let's talk about the book. Wait. The book opens as a nameless character stands on a beach on the island of Matanui, struggling with amnesia. A beach. He was standing on a sweeping expanse of sand, sloping gently down to the sea. As he gazed out at the ocean, he saw waves breaking over a coral reef. Beyond that, there was nothing but water stretching to an unbroken horizon. Where am I, he thought, his mind a haze of memories and dreams. Who am I? Tahu. The word, a name, floated through his mind. It seemed to fit, to make sense somehow, but little else did. Tahu is pretty frustrated with this not knowing anything business, but he finds a mask that boosts his power and a sword that lets him channel his elemental power of fire. Tahu manages to control the rage he feels toward his amnesia as the scene transitions. This 3-page segment is one of my favorites in the entire Bionicle book series. There's plenty of awesome stuff coming, don't you worry. We haven't hit the high water mark quite yet. But this scene is well written, concisely described, and portrays Tahu's thoughts in an engaging and emotive way that really sells his inner struggles. This scene also portrays Tahu's personality quite effectively. He's a fiery dude, and not just because of his powers. We see this from the other Toa introductions as well. Lewa is a spaz, Onua is ponderous, Gali is empathetic, like how water hosts lots of life forms, and how girls are supposed to be, apparently. Pohatu is friendly, like really friendly, straight up total extrovert, with confidence like a rock, and Kopaka is cold, because ice. Also, being antisocial makes him a badass. Obviously. As you can imagine, Pohatu and Kopaka make a fun pair. In fact, we see Pohatu and Kopaka interact as Pohatu happens on Kopaka while searching for the other Toa. Despite Kopaka's initial rejection, but it turned out that the newcomer was not to be abandoned so easily. "Wait," he called again, he being Pohatu, scrabbling up the hill. "Listen, I have a feeling we're both here for the same reason. Why not team up? It might make things easier." "I work alone." "By choice?" Pohatu returned quickly, "or just because no one can stand you?" He accompanies Kopaka to discover something called a Kanohi Mask of Power, much like the one Tahu put on earlier. Kanohi are masks that supplement and unlock the full power of a Toa, while each one also affords an additional power to the wearer. Each Toa came with a mask, like literally they did, it was right in the canister. And they have 5 more to find, like literally they did, it must have been a nightmare to track all them down too. Each Toa's Turaga told them that the Kanohi exist, and that finding each of these masks was the key to defeating Makuta. Spoiler alert, the entire subplot of finding the masks is completely ancillary to the main point of the book, and is used as a backdrop to the overall plot. It isn't important to any of the later books, or even later in this one, so we'll be skipping most of it. We cool? Well, too bad, I already made the video, so you just have to deal with it. Kopaka and Pohatu find Kopaka's first additional mask, which merges with his original one while it's still on his face. Yeah, it's some kind of matter rearrangement thing, who knows at this point. Unfortunately for the introverted Icicle, Kopaka accidentally finds the other Toa while testing his original mask, and is forced by his internal sense of duty to bring Pohatu along to meet his fellow Toa. The meeting of these massively disparate personalities goes about as well as could be expected, and by that I mean they don't really get along at all. Kopaka is immediately hardcore triggered by Tahu, but what do you expect from Fire and Ice? The Toa argue about how to organize their search parties. Kopaka disagrees with Tahu, which triggers him, and Tahu triggers him back. Yeah, get used to this. Enough of this bickering, Tahu broke in impatiently. "We will accomplish nothing by standing here and having a debate. The decision is made. We will split into small groups. It's the best of both worlds, can't you see that?" "All I see is one who believes that power belongs to whoever shouts the loudest," Kopaka thought in disgust. "Well, I for one am not ready to bow to such a leader, not as long as I have life in my body." Apparently Kopaka and Tahu aren't the only ones getting triggered, because Makuta's had enough of the Toa's bickering, and sends a storm to encourage them to get on with it, raining lightning bolts on the mountain beside them and causing boulders to fall in their midst over and over until he gets bored and stops. The Toa take the hit and get on with it, each going their own way, which isn't what Tahu wanted. Because he's a grumpy baby, Tahu stomps back to the part of the island he calls home, the region known as Tawahi, marked by the slopes of the Mangai volcano. There he meets a Matoran named Jala. Jala's expression turns serious. "I came to see how your search for the masks was going. Don't take this the wrong way, but do you have any kind of plan for finding them?" Tahu frowned, feeling his fiery temper rising. How dare this lowly Matoran question his tactics? "Of course I have a plan," he snapped. I'm searching for the masks. Okay, perhaps I don't have an exact plan as such, but I'm working on it." At the time of this story, the Toa are still seen by many of the Matoran as infallible legendary heroes, but Jala is an exception to this rule, seeing Tahu as another imperfect person who could benefit from some friendly advice. He's got some guts, that one. He'll go far. Yes, he's named Jala here, but he's better known as Jala. Confusing? It sure is. There is a reason, but it's not important now. Sure, lots of other people have talked about it though, so go do the search engine swagger if you want to know. Jala informs Tahu of a mask deep in the tunnels of Onuwahi, where Tahu promptly goes. It wasn't long before Tahu realized why the Matoran had been so worried. Everything about the dark twisting tunnels of Onuwahi felt wrong. Even with the glow cast by his fire sword, the darkness seemed to huddle around him, suffocating in its closeness. Taking a deep breath, he forced himself to move on. Some dark part of his mind protested, "No, we don't belong here. We shouldn't be here. We'll be crushed." But Tahu shook his head fiercely, willing such thoughts away. The air grew cold and still. The flame on his sword sputtered and flickered, but the force of his will kept it burning. Almost there, he told himself grimly. I can feel it. These tunnels can't possibly go much deeper. And yet they did. Deeper and deeper and deeper. Until Tahu started to wonder if he hadn't just imagined there was a surface world at all. Deeper, until he started seeing strange shapes moving in the shadows just beyond his glowing red light. And still deeper. That is some tight, immersive writing. Nice going, Hapka. I've always loved that part. Tahu has to cross a narrow bridge over a seemingly bottomless pit to get his mask, but he runs into trouble when a swarm of firefly-like scorpions start crawling all over him and doing the pinchy-pinchy thing. Using some sick parkour skills, as the kids say, he dislodges all the scorpions except one that clings to his leg. He removes it from his leg and takes a look at it, noticing that it's got a tiny little mask on its face. Tahu decides to see what happens when he takes the mask off. It dies. Just kidding. The scorpion's mind is actually just reset, and so it stops trying to pinch Tahu, so Tahu lets it go free and it crawls away. He drops it into the abyss though, unfortunately for all the wiki nerds, denying the possibility of any kind of explanation of non-standard Kanohi sizes. Tahu gets his mask though, so it's all good. With every step, Kopaka cursed the heat, smoke, and choking ash of Tawahi. Why did a mask of strength have to be hidden in such a place? He had no idea, and he hoped that the Matoran who had given him the tip had not led him astray. Pausing as another wave of heat overwhelmed him, Kopaka raised his ice blade to his neck, letting its welcome coldness revive him. How could anyone spend any time in this infernal volcano, let alone live there? An image of Tahu floated through his mind and he grimaced. If the toe of fire could see him now, he'd probably laugh his mask off. Of course, I'd like to see Tahu get along in Kauai, Pohatu thought. He'd probably melt a hole in a glacier and spend so much energy yelling at the ice that he couldn't climb out. The thought amused him, giving him the strength to get moving again. Kopaka finds the Mask of Strength, or Kanohi Bakari, that he's looking for on an island in the middle of the lava lagoon, which he decides to reach by riding an iceberg made from a nearby hot spring. He uses his sword as a paddle to drive the iceberg across the lava lagoon, reaching his mask in more than enough time to get it and start paddling back. He derps up, though, and hacks off a part of the iceberg with his sword on accident, the chunks of ice hitting him in the head and knocking him out. While conked out on the melting iceberg, his unconscious mind trying to wake up, Kopaka is assaulted by a vision about a temple in the center of the island, narrated by a disembodied voice trying to comfort him and tell him something about the masks of power. Remember this, it's going to be important later. Once it's done, Kopaka wakes up to find that the lava has nearly melted his entire iceberg and that he's still far from shore. Desperately, he tries in vain to jump back, but Leiwa appears in the nick of time to blow his brother up and over to shore, albeit with a hard landing. Leiwa mentions some adventure he had that we don't get to read about, and lets Kopaka know that Onua has called a Toa meeting, wanting to work together. Leiwa's not any more thrilled about working with the others than Kopaka is, but he keeps his optimistic outlook as they head to the unmentioned meeting place. At the meeting we don't read about, it's decided the Toa will work as a team instead of splitting up like last time. To be fair about this though, if that's all that we got out of the meeting, we probably didn't need a depiction of it in the book anyway. The Toa are currently looking for Tahu's Kanohi Miru, or Mask of Levitation, which is somewhere in the ocean before them. Leiwa whines about having to swim once before on another adventure we don't get to read about, but is reminded that half the Toa currently have the Mask of Water Breathing, or Kanohi Kaukau, so they'll be the ones to go on this excursion. Brief aside, the Mask of Water Breathing is not the Mask of Holding Breath a long time. It's the Mask of Water Breathing. Like, seriously, the Toa even speak underwater in the next scene. Seriously, the Kanohi Kaukau is really underrated. Turns out this Miru the Toa are looking for is guarded by a Tarakava, which looks like this. Apparently it's supposed to be a water snake thing with mantis shrimp style boxing arms or something, with a tank tread on its butt. Or maybe that's a really stumpy tail? Whatever's going on with its anatomy, it lives underwater and it's bad news. And it has a really cool name. The Toa get it to attack them, and by them I mean Kopaka, who, like the badass he is, just floats there until it gets close and then freezes it solid. Onua, using his earth powers, follows up with some sand manipulation to trap it at the bottom of the ocean. Onua also uses a bit of a sand geyser to knock the Tarakava's rusted-looking mask off its face, which causes it to stop trying to attack them, and instead only try to escape. The Toa then establish that Makuta controls the Rahi through the infected masks they wear, which will come in very handy for the play functions of the toys. I mean, giving the Matoran the knowledge they did need to defend themselves from Rahi and disable Makuta's control of them. Yeah, that. This is also why the Scorpion stopped attacking Tahu earlier. He had removed its mask. Elsewhere, the Toa have apparently given up on working as a single team and split into two teams. One has Leiwa on it, whose stylish flair and mask grabbing is annoying Kopaka, who wishes he could be as cool as Leiwa. And the other group has Tahu, who, to grab a mask in a tree, almost burns down an entire forest, which would dramatically increase the Toa's carbon footprint. This triggers Gali really hard, and she stomps off like a whiny baby, rather than accept some, all things considered, minor damage to the local environment. Seriously, Gali will do some crazy destructive things later in her life, and this isn't even the first tree Tahu's gonna burn for the cause. But we're not there yet. And those also weren't written by Hapka. A while later, the Toa finally have all 30 of their additional masks found, and they wonder how to find these things called the Golden Kanohi, which we never read their Turaga mention, and which are supposed to be their ultimate prize. Kopaka mentions his vision, which depicted the temple Kini Nui in the center of the island, and suggests the Toa go there. Tahu is annoyed that Kopaka didn't mention this earlier, but hey wow, Tahu finds a reason to be annoyed at Kopaka, amazing, what else is new? Upon reaching the temple, the Toa finds some statues that look like them, just without masks. I guess it's kinda like finding a statue of yourself, except with your stuff hanging out. Like if Michelangelo's David was made before the actual David, and he found it with an auditory hallucination. I'm getting way off topic. Tahu hits on the impulse to put his mask on his statue's face, and the others follow suit as the statues absorb their masks one at a time until all 6 of them have relinquished all 6 of their masks to the statues. For a moment, nothing happened. Onua felt his heart sink. Had they just given away their masks of power for no good reason? Had all this been a trick of Makuta? Then there was a peal of sound, like great bells blended with laughter. Great bells blended with laughter. I have no idea what that sounds like, but it's probably a good thing. The Toa descend into the shadows of what will later be known as Mangaya, Makuta's lair on the island of Mananui. They reach a massive chamber, the centerpiece being a massive door. They begin to approach the door when they're interrupted by a pair of manas. These things. Giant tank-like crab rahi that serve Makuta. Leiwa remembers that the Turaga had warned the Toa that they were individually incapable of defeating a manas, But this doesn't stop him from throwing his entire body onto the back of one of them to try and flip it over, and failing. Despite Liwa's best body-hurling efforts, the Toa are unable to defeat the Manas until Gali reveals that she had the same vision as Kopaka did back in the Lava Lagoon. But she also paid more attention, probably because she wasn't facing lava death at the time. "Don't you see?" Gali stared into his eyes, almost seeming to forget about the Manas who were attacking the other Toa nearby. "I was told that 3 shall become Weruha and walk the path of wisdom. 3 shall become Akame and walk the path of the warrior. Only by uniting will the Toa find the strength to triumph." Basically, the Toa are meant to fuse into 2 beings, each made from a group of 3 individual Toa. It's not weird because they're robots. They don't really do things. Nobody's thinking it's weird in the story, so you don't have to either, just accept it. Actually, Kopaka thinks it's weird to give up his own individual mind, but he gets over it. As if part of one of his own dreams, Kopaka moved toward Gali and Liwa. Nearby, Tahu turned to face Pohatu and Onua. In each group, 3 Toa locked eyes and became one. The Toa split into trios, link hands, make eye contact, and merge into 2 fusions, Toa Kaita. Tahu, Pohatu, and Onua merge to form into the volcanic warrior Akame, with his Mask of Valor that he doesn't use, and Kopaka, Gali, and Liwa fuse to form the blizzard-bringing sage Weruha with his Mask of Wisdom that he also doesn't use. They defeat the Manas handily, and Weruha removes their masks. Akame cleans up the molten mess he made in the battle, and the fusions dissolve as quickly as they came, giving the Toa their individual minds back. The Fire Toa turned just in time to raise his sword against the onslaught. The face of his attacker was hidden behind a blackened, pitted mask. Black smoke billowed from its sword. The smoke theme for Shadow Tahu is a nice touch. Yeah, so there are these dark versions of the Toa, presumably created by Makuta, who they all fight, each pairing with their own dark doppelganger. The descriptions of them as embodying a dark or corrupted version of the Toa's original element is very cleverly done. For example, Shadow Gali calls to mind an oil slick, and Shadow Liwa's green is the green of a sickly plant. But these Shadow Toa do basically nothing that's described in the narration, after Shadow Tahu rushes Tahu, of course. They just dodge stuff from the original Toa, and mock the Toa with dark versions of their own personalities, with their own faults magnified and best traits reversed, which is very clever, honestly. I see you've just recognized the cold, hard truth. And now Shadow Kopaka needs to die for that pun. This isn't Attack of the Clones, dude. I demand a higher standard of punnage. It's worth noting that the Shadow Toa basically never use their elemental powers, but rather evade the main Toa's attacks, which inconvenience and sometimes even hit their teammates. Since the Shadow Toa represent the darkness in the Toa's hearts, this is a good metaphor for how the Toa's faults can end up hindering their teammates if left unchecked. If they don't handle themselves properly, they hurt each other as much as they hurt themselves. Kopaka smiled as he saw that his enemy was frozen in place. Kopaka sent the frozen enemy skittering across the ice until it smashed into the cavern wall. The creature shattered into hundreds of icy shards, and each of the ice shards was forming into a new enemy. Dang it, Shadow Kopaka, just die! This is bad, Onua thought hopelessly, dodging another blow from his own enemy. How can I fight one so much like myself? How can any of us? He blinked as the answer dawned on him. Of course! Listen up, he shouted. We're going about this all wrong. We can't hope to defeat our own Shadow Devils, but that's why we're a team. He wanted to say more, but he didn't have the chance. He had to dive aside to avoid another blow from his opponent's weapon. Pohatu hears Onua and attacks Shadow Tahu. Flame shot out of its sword, but it was no use. It couldn't melt the falling stones fast enough. Within seconds, it was buried beneath a mound of rocky debris. Oh, okay. Sure, now you use your powers. Whatever. Although that might be a metaphor for how the Toa's own personality strengths give rise to their weaknesses, and as long as they are themselves, they will always have their own personal shortcomings, but maybe that's looking at it too deeply. Interestingly, as the Shadow Toa are destroyed, they leave behind a bit of their own elements, suggesting maybe Makuta made them with shadows entwined with the original Toa's element? Boy, do I wish the Shadow Toa were addressed anywhere else, because it'd be really interesting. Steam hissed out in all directions, obscuring his view. When it faded, nothing remained of Shadow Gali but a puddle on the cavern floor. The defeat of 2 of the Shadow enemies gave the other Toa new strength of purpose. Gali reformed her flood and sent it gurgling toward Shadow Onua. It cried out in dismay as water pounded against it, eroding it away to nothing but a bit of sand. The Ice Toa looked startled but threw himself to the floor. A split second later, the whirlwind roared down around him, grabbing the shard soldiers into its grasp and spinning them around and around at dizzying speed. The icy shard soldiers crashed into one another again and again. Before long, they had disintegrated into tiny sparkles of ice. Bad move, Kopaka said bleakly. What if they all form into enemies again? Not a problem, Tahu said, blasting the ice crystals with his fire sword. Within seconds, they had melted and evaporated into steam. About dang time, Shadow Kopaka. And no, Kopaka can't do that. Only Shadow Kopaka. No, it's never explained. Ever. What the Karzani? Also, everything I just told you about Onua's idea about switching doubles was a lie. It never happened that way. And here we get into Apocrypha. See, in the Bionicle Encyclopedia, released in 2005, 2 years after this book, this encounter is very different. In the entry for the Shadow Toa, it seemingly retcons the scene written by Kathy Apka, stating instead that the Toa realized the Shadow Toa were manifestations of their inner shadows and thus absorbed them back into themselves. Now, I thought this was a retcon my entire life, and it even introduced the concept of what a retcon is to me, but apparently the story Bible they used in 2001 agrees with an encyclopedia, but I can't verify this. Bottom line though, the encyclopedia gets the final word. The end of the Manus fight is apocryphal as well, but this isn't a wiki article, this is a video, one that's already gone on way too long. Just read the wiki if you want to know more details. Now, I know it's at best apocryphal, but I have to hand it to Hapka. Her version of events has a stronger metaphorical edge. As we've seen throughout this book, the Toa have strengths, but they also have weaknesses, and they are strong because they are together a team, not because they are individually in control of their inner demons. That's why they have to have unity. And I guess you could say, well, they showed their unity in the fight against Makuta, and this fight is when they conquer their own problems before they team up for the final battle. If that's you, then I'd like to contest that the point of unity is to make up for problems that we can't fix in ourselves. Otherwise, you're just fine by yourself and no support structure is needed, and that's not really how life works. But I digress. All I'm saying is, I like Hapka's version of events better than the canon version for story reasons, but I do acknowledge in the end it doesn't really matter. After catching his breath, Tahu sat up and glanced at Onua, who was watching the others thoughtfully. "What do you think, brother?" he asked the Earth Toa. Onua smiled, though there was a hint of wariness in his eyes. "I think," he said, "that we have won an important battle, and of that we can be proud, but there is much more to come." Tahu nodded, his grin fading as he gripped his fire sword more tightly. Yes, Onua was right. He could feel it, burning in his mind like a half-remembered dream. There was much more to come. And that's how the book ends. But come on, I won't leave you on that kind of cliffhanger. Just kidding. We need to see how the battle against Makuta ends, because it's not discussed in the next book either. No, the story is exclusive to the web game I mentioned earlier. I actually came in late to BIONICLE, somewhere around the end of 2003, and I didn't even know there was an actual battle against Makuta from the 2001 story year until I tripped over some screenshots of Motonui Online Game on the wiki. The beginning of the next book was very confusing to me back then, let me tell you. Anyway, in Motonui Online Game, yes! Finally, some video to use in my video review! The Toa combine their powers to defeat Makuta, and return to the island's surface in victory, where they help the Matoran deal with the remaining Rahi after some, obligatory parties and stuff. So how about that first BIONICLE book? Got some sweet character building, some lore, some important future characters, some insight into the meta-narrative of BIONICLE's production timeline, the apocryphal battle of the Shadow Toa. It's not the best in the series, as we'll eventually see, but it's a decent enough book to read. Its narrative, though somewhat disjointed to avoid treading on ground the comics have already covered, does take excerpts from the Toa's quest for the masks, not that one though, and strings them together thematically to show the Toa's flaws and their reason for unity. There's some use of sound effects at certain points in the texts, not like automatopoeia, but like actually a sound effect in the book, which is a classic kids book trope, but it's fine and it's not as annoying as some other books I've read. I can't really rag on the underdeveloped ending either, because I get the feeling that Hapka might have had little choice. And I have to say, the action scenes are excitingly and effectively written, with an energy and pacing that really does keep the book in my hands. A tale of a Toa indeed, and one worth looking at. And I mean, the running theme with the BIONICLE books is that they're not very long, so even if one's not that good, it doesn't really represent a big time investment lost. Man, the series might have been a bad idea. Well, we'll see how things go next time with BIONICLE Chronicles 2, Beware the Balrog, as we listen again to our legend of the BIONICLE. Thanks for watching, have a good whatever.